Welcome to the BJ Show. Let's rock and roll. Rock and roll. Come on, everybody. Let's lose control. Brand John never wants to follow. Yeah, ready for the ride. It's the BJ Show. BJ Show.
It is the BJ Show. Today's date is it the 20th of May already, John? Is it the 20th?
It's May 20th today, Brad.
Man, is that like, hold it now. 420 days when you're supposed to use marijuana. Is 520 cocaine day? Is that what that is?
I think it's Hookers for Heroin Day.
Hookers for Heroin Day. It's one of those kind of days.
You can't get that in a drive-thru, though. You can't get your opiates in a drive-thru yet unless you have a prescription drug connect, Brad.
Wow, one of those kind of things. That is John Combest, C-O-M-B-E-S-T. I'll spell his name because of the fact that he puts together this amazing website, johncombest.com. How you spell his name? JOHNCOMBEST.com, if you don't know what the .com is about. That's what you do. John, before we get into the top three, which is what John does, John has this extensive list he puts up every morning, dozens of stories, but we bring it down to what he thinks are the three biggest stories. That's what we do this morning. Two things. First off, you never heard the saying, brilliant minds think alike, something like that?
I have heard that before. Yeah. In fact, I thought of that right before you said it, Brad.
This morning.
Isn't that ironic?
This morning, Marc Cox was talking about, in 97.1, was talking about the Mike Kehoe special session to get money.
No way. Is there a link to it on johncombest.com, the entire conversation with John Lamping?
Is it already up?
Oh, there is, Brad. You're right. Go ahead.
Okay. And he said, why don't they just bring the Royals and the Kansas City Chiefs to St. Louis? How come nobody's thought about that before? And I'm thinking to myself, how long have we talked about this? And you hear nobody except me and Marc Cox now talking about this. I just don't get it. Now, I will say this, John, that if something happened to Mr. Kehoe, our governor, and let's say the same thing happened like with him and the president, where he really wasn't in charge anymore. He was like in his room and his wife would...
Yeah, kind of convalescing.
Right. Do you know who his wife's name is? Do you know who Governor
Yeah,
Kehoe?
Claudia.
Claudia. Okay. And Claudia would come out of the governor's mansion every morning and go, well, Mike can't come out and talk to you, but let me tell you what he told me to tell you. When reality, Mike was like, sort of like, out of it. He was like in a coma. And Claudia comes out every morning and she says, Mike has changed his mind and he says he doesn't care about sports anymore. And those Royals and those Chiefs, they can go to Kansas. As far as he's concerned, they can go to Tulsa or Oklahoma City. You get where I'm heading with this, John?
Yeah, is that a Joe Biden type? And that's part of you have a great blue pill pedestalization rant where you say if women were in charge of government, they'd tell the sports teams, get the heck out of here.
Right. They'd say to the sports teams, hey, you guys pay us to stay in Missouri. If you move to Kansas, then we want nothing to do with you, and we'll pretend you don't exist anymore. Matter of fact, what we're going to do is the Mizzou Tigers are, for all intents and purposes, a professional team now because the players are getting paid. We'll just promote the Tigers as a professional team, and we'll just call it the CFL, the College Football League, and they're going to be our new team in the state of Missouri. And we've already got a big stadium down in Furrow Field down in Columbia. So we don't need your stinking Arrowhead Stadium. We don't need your stinking K Stadium. We don't need any of that, right? What do you think, John? No?
I think that Kehoe has put out the most controversial statement of 2025, where he said Joe Biden wouldn't have gotten prostate cancer if he had just made a trip to Dave Sinclair.
Should I explain that for people who are going like, what the hell does that mean?
Sure, go ahead. If you can do it in a non-meandering way, let's get to it.
John makes fun of the fact that every year I go to the free prostate cancer screening clinic held by Dave Sinclair. He has three of them out of 3 dealerships. Every year I get my prostate level check. They do the PSA check. And John's alluding to the fact that our president didn't go to Dave Sinclair to have his... That is sort of funny, John.
He did not. And Brad, of course, you not only, they tell you that you can just do the blood analysis, but you insist on the digital check.
That's not the way it works, John.
I am pretty sure that you insist. They know you as the guy that insists on the digital check.
Yeah, that's right. Zeros and ones. Okay, we bring in this guy every morning. What's your name, sir?
I'm Casey Kasem.
And John counts them down, starting with...
In third place...
Speaking of statements from Governor Kehoe, a statement we got yesterday from the governor. A 3-day event begins today, Brad, an hour after we get off the air. 9 a.m. in St. Louis, a procession will bring former governor, former senator Kit Bond from St. Louis to the Missouri Capitol. And he will lie in state at the Capitol for 24 hours. So the governor, when somebody's governor, you continue to call them governor. Governor Bond will lie in state for 24 hours. Tomorrow, he will be brought back to St. Louis. And then on Thursday, a celebration of life will take place at the Ladue Chapel Presbyterian Church. Now, today at the Capitol, the event is open to the public, but it's standing room only today. So folks that are in Jeff City or want to travel to Jeff City can come to the Capitol Rotunda at noon, and there will be a service there for Governor Bond. The service will be live streamed on Governor Kehoe's Facebook page and the State of Missouri website. So memories today of Kit Bond will continue today, tomorrow, which is Wednesday, and Thursday, May 22nd, is the celebration of life.
Interesting. And so, therefore, he's officially a resident of Missouri then, right?
I guess, yeah, he will. I assume he will be buried here in Missouri, Brad.
That's a joke between John and I, but that's a whole nother story. Okay, we ready for number 2?
We sure are.
Up a notch to number 2.
We're talking about federal issues a lot lately, Brad. Yesterday, all 3 stories had to do with our federal elected officials, and today is much the same. Senator Josh Hawley, who's generally seen as being a Trump loyalist, he had some misgivings about that big, beautiful plane, the palace in the sky, that would be a gift from Qatar to President Trump. The headline from Missouri Net's Marshall Griffin: Missouri Senator Hawley has misgivings about Qatar's jumbo jet gift to Trump. Excuse me. To Hawley's point in general is that if Qatar is serious about helping the United States, they're not just going to focus on giving a plane. They're going to stop giving aid. They're going to stop aiding and abetting Islamic terrorists who, quote, are trying to kill Americans. Here's the quote from Hawley: quit trying to put spies in our universities, which Qatar has also been doing. So the short of it, Brad, is that Senator Hawley says, hey, cute that you want to give the president a gift, but there's other things you do that could be more meaningful. For example, here's another quote: I saw they did just put in a huge order, Qatar did, for a bunch of American-made planes. That's more like it. And then Marshall Griffin notes that Hawley did not mention what kind of planes they are or which American company built them. And meanwhile, Marshall Griffin sums it up by saying that the president said that it would be, quote, stupid not to accept the plane as a gift from Qatar. So, as we discussed yesterday, Brad, in the top 3 stories, that was May 19th, 2025, Josh Hawley is looking to position himself consistently as a populist. And every once in a while, that'll put him on the opposite side of President Trump.
John, can I put on my aviation nerd hat for a minute?
Oh, please do.
The jets that are currently Air Force One, there's 2 of them, and they rotate back and forth depending upon which one's in for maintenance, are 747-200 series. I did a little digging on this, and the interesting thing about this is my research shows that the 200 series, that there may be only 3 other planes in the entire world that are still flying for the 200 series from 747. Do you know why, John?
Because they're not very good.
Because they've hit EOL, end of life. And what happens with aircraft, especially aircraft that fly way up there, where they pressurize them and, you depressurize, you depressurize them, okay? That's called a cycle. And most planes have a life limit of how many times they can be cycled. They take off, they're pressurized, they land, they depressurize, okay? the reason that there are no 200 series, hardly any 200 series 747s still flying, because they're dangerous. So here the Qatar people are saying, oh my God, Donald Trump, you're flying around in a 747 200 series. We respect you. We want to take care of you. We don't want anything to happen to you. We're going to give you a 747 800 series, which was the last current production model. I say they're helping out our country. What do you think, John?
I think that most analyses would say that you've reached your end of life cycle, Brad, but you're still on the radio. I mean, federal agencies, the FCC lets you broadcast.
I'm the 1935 series. And you know what the interesting thing about that? The year before
what's that, Brad?
The year before I was born, they put out the Communications Act of 1934. So a year later, I was there.
That is amazing, Brad. Wait, did you just switch off your aviation hat and put your FCC nerd hat on? I was glad to see, Brad. I don't know who should get credit for this, but a couple months ago, I went to the Wikipedia page for KSLQ and I saw that it had been updated.
Yes.
It was amazing because there had been so much information. Critics would say that the owner of the station didn't neglect basic things like KSLQ Wikipedia was the #1 search result. But we're not critics here, Brad. It looks like the KSLQ Wikipedia page has been updated, and that's phenomenal.
John, I try to take care of business, buddy. I mean,
you know what? It's certainly, it's like going and seeing a thumbnail yesterday for our show, Brad. It was awesome. If you see a toddler start to walk, you don't say, hey, kid, you should really go heel, ball of the foot, push off. You're just happy that the infant is learning how to walk.
Is that President Biden speak because he called it?
Hey, it has to do with his wide box. But enough about Joe Biden, Brad. Let's get back to Hawley. He's in story number 1.
The number 1.
A two-phase story today, Brad, that has to do with the storm response to the St. Louis tornado. I think everyone is familiar. Certainly everyone who listened to a 3-minute segment on the TJ show yesterday is familiar. That tornadoes touched down in Clayton, went through Forest Park, went through North St. Louis. And two stories today, I think, really encapsulate what happened. The first is from the Post-Dispatch. Joe Holliman covered Josh Hawley in St. Louis. Josh Hawley not only talked about how FEMA needs to step up and pay for damage done to folks who didn't have homeowners insurance or didn't take the appropriate steps to cover their house, but Hawley also took aim at insurance companies. Now, Holliman points out something that I think is really unique timing here, Brad, that I didn't know. Hawley is the chairman of a subcommittee that looks at insurance companies. The committee is called the Senate Subcommittee on Disaster Management. And just last week, before these storms hit, Hawley criticized insurance companies' claim handling during recent natural disasters. And he was grilling Allstate, State Farm in particular, about the fact that they seemed to be making payouts that were less than independent appraisers would say that the policy owners deserved. So Hawley beating up on the insurance companies, that's the first piece of this two-phase story. The second one is Governor Mike Kehoe yesterday morning was on the Marc Cox morning show, giving some insight into the local response. Governor Kehoe started off on the federal level. He thanked Senator Schmitt for being on top of this from the very beginning. He pointed out that Schmitt has a great relationship with Kristi Noem. The governor pointed out that Kristi Noem called Kehoe first thing on Saturday morning to offer her help, her assistance. Kehoe also mentioned that President Trump called him to offer his support. So it seems like on the federal level, folks are paying attention. FEMA agents will be arriving in St. Louis tomorrow. I don't know if that's protocol. I don't know if they usually wait a few days before they come in, but that's the federal piece, Brad. And then interestingly, Governor Kehoe said that he thinks that Mayor Cara Spencer has done a, quote, very good job, unquote, with storm response. Now, you've probably seen, Brad, these stories about how the tornado alarm sirens didn't go off. I didn't dive into those stories. Those have nothing to do with state or federal politics, so I didn't read them. But Kehoe giving praise to Mayor Cara Spencer for the local response to tornadoes.
He didn't watch the press conference, did he, yesterday with Mayor Spencer?
Yeah, I think Marc Cox's morning show is on in the morning. So, yeah, he wouldn't have had a chance to watch a press conference that hadn't happened yet.
Okay, I see what you're saying there. Did you, by any chance, get a synopsis of the press conference?
I did not. Like I said, I didn't dive into or read the stories about the tornado sirens going off. I figured you would watch them, Brad.
She was repeatedly asked. She's come out and said it's human error. Nobody pushed the button to actuate the alarm sirens. And the press kept asking, well, whose responsibility was that? And she would never say. Don't you think it is amazing that and she kept talking about the protocol and stuff like that. I don't understand how you can have, and the crazy thing about it is, anybody who has a cell phone now, and if you listen to the radio, the EAS systems go off when the tornado warnings come out. Typically, most of the counties, if you're like in St. Charles County and there's a tornado warning for St. Charles County, automatically the counties adjacent to that, which would be in this case Lincoln County and Franklin County, and even St. Louis County, automatically sound the sirens because of the fact that if it's coming from one direction, it may come in the next county over, if you get what I'm saying, right?
I do. I get exactly what you're saying. So you're saying that in 2025, St. Louis City is relying on a human being to be there and push a button.
You know, the crazy thing about it is they tested the system on Thursday. So somebody was there to press the button on Thursday. And I have to be honest with you. When I kept hearing all these people on the news report saying, we never heard the sirens go off, all of a sudden the tornado was here and tearing our roof off, I'm thinking to myself, how can that be? I'm thinking to myself, how could they have not heard the sirens? Well, now I look like the stupid jerk because I'm like, the reason they didn't hear the sirens because there were no sirens. John, another reason why people don't want to live in the city. It's incompetence.
Yeah, it would seem that way. Now, Brad, I did see yesterday, I only skimmed one story yesterday, but I saw that Cara Spencer said that the people that would have been responsible for that on Friday were off-site. Did you see this? She said that they were off-site at some kind of a conference or a meeting or something?
But once again, you know, this is like in the military. This is like corporate 101. If the president of the company is having an operation, you know, and he's going to be under anesthetic and be in the hospital for a couple of days, when you were back in the day, when you worked at Monsanto, if the president of Monsanto was going to be in the hospital for a couple of days and be, you know, under the knife and the whole bit, isn't there a protocol that the number two guy is essentially?
There certainly is, yeah. And that's the good time to make all the decisions the CEO wouldn't want to make.
Right. Like, remember.
Let's give John Combest a pay raise.
Remember back in the day when we had the split between Republicans and Dems as far as the governor and lieutenant governor, when Lieutenant Governor Kinder was a Repub, and who was the governor at the time? Was that Jay Nixon? It
was Jay Bird Nixon,
okay,
yeah.
And remember the story that they floated that Jay Nixon was afraid to leave the state because of the fact that once he left the state, that Peter Kinder was in charge and he was going to, well, let's do this, all the things.
Yeah. Peter would just take advantage of the situation, right. For sure. Yeah. I see what you're saying, though, Brad. You would think that there would be a protocol, a standard operating procedure.
And not only that, because I believe in St. Louis County, I know for a fact in St. Charles County, all that's controlled by the dispatching operations, which the people are there 24/7, 365. There's a button you push, bonk, you hit the button, the sirens go off. It's not that complicated. You know what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're saying. And the good thing for Cara Spencer is she's still so new, a little more than a month in, that she can still. I don't think normal people look at her and blame Cara Spencer for this being 6 or 7 weeks in. Well, and so she's still, luckily for her, still in that honeymoon.
Well, now hold on a minute. Now we had Pete Buttigieg, who blamed Sean Duffy, who I think at the time had been the new Department of Transportation chairman, for 2 days when we had the horrible plane crash in D.C. at Reagan National, where the Army helicopter smashed into the commuter plane. And Pete Buttigieg, according to him, that was Sean Duffy's fault. Dude, get a rest. You know, I mean, man, I'll tell you what. Politics. You know, let me run the world and things will be much better.
Brett, I think you've reached your end of life cycle for this segment.
Okay, we have to take a break.